The last section of the book, chapters 31 to 34, is a sort of miscellany of appendices. There's some ancient poetry that's found in chapter 32, which is referred to as the Song of Moses. Scholars refer to it as the Song of Moses. We have the blessings of Moses recorded in chapter 33. And then chapter 34 is the story of Moses' death. I read part of that to you. Now, centuries ago already, scholars of the Bible noted that Deuteronomy opens with the verse, "These are the words that Moses addressed to all Israel on the other side of the Jordan." That is to say, the Transjordan, on the other side of the Jordan. So that line is obviously written from the perspective of someone who is inside the land, saying Moses said that when he was over there, outside the land, on the other side of the Jordan. So he's looking eastward. And so that's a line that one would think could not be written by Moses, because Moses did not ever enter the land and would not be in a position to talk about something being on the other side of the Jordan. Likewise, the last chapter, which describes Moses' death and burial, probably was not written by him. So, as we shall see, these and many other textual features point to the period of composition for Deuteronomy, which was many centuries after the time that Moses would have been supposed to have lived, or if we are to assume he was a historical character. And so through careful analysis, you have scholars like Moshe Weinfeld and many others, but analysis of scholars like these have led them to draw the conclusion that the original core of Deuteronomy emerged in the 8th century. It was probably known as a scroll of laws known as the book or the scroll of the Torah. Deuteronomy refers to itself that way in Deuteronomy 17, verses 19 and 20. And so we think it was probably something roughly equivalent to chapters 12 to 26. Maybe there was a little introduction, a little conclusion. And eventually these laws were put into the framework of a speech by Moses, maybe chapters 5 through 11 and maybe 28. Maybe that would have been in the 8th, 7th century. And then at some later point, several things happened. And I will say them in the following order, but that doesn't mean they happened in this order. We really aren't sure. At some point, several things happened. You have framing chapters, Deuteronomy 1 through 4, this sort of introductory frame and historical review, as well as the appendices at the end, chapters 31 and 34. Those get added. You also have laws being updated, passages being expanded to reflect the experience of exile. You will remember that as of 586, the Israelites, Jerusalem is destroyed and the Israelites are in exile in Babylonia. Additionally, at some point, Deuteronomy is appended to the other 4 books of the Pentateuch. Genesis through Numbers is made to precede this. It's serving, therefore, as their conclusion, and by being joined to them, it confers its title as a book of Torah, as a scroll of Torah, to that material as well. They don't use the word Torah in that way in those books. Only Deuteronomy uses the word Torah to speak of God's instruction or revelation over all. So by being appended now to Genesis through Numbers, all of this perhaps comes to be known as Torah as well. And then finally, during the exile, or probably during the period after the exile, during the exile, down to the end of the 6th century, Deuteronomy was incorporated into a larger narrative history that runs from Joshua through Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. That's all a unit, as we'll come to see in the next lecture. And so Deuteronomy, in a way, served as an introduction to that material looking forward. So a conclusion to the previous 4 books, but also an introduction to a long narrative history that's going to run through to the end of 2nd Kings. Now, there's a lot of debate over the precise timing of these events and this process by which this material grew and was expanded. But in the post-exilic period, at some point, the entire unit, the Genesis through Numbers material, Deuteronomy, and then the lengthy historical narrative all the way through 2nd Kings, was solidified